protein foods now as we come into the acid-forming foods. Protein foods are nuts, legumes, dried beans and peas, seeds, and in the animal products, eggs and cheese and flesh foods. So look at the nuts. These are almonds. They are outstanding nutrition. In that packet there is a bit more than enough protein for a whole day. Almonds have about the same amount of protein as young lamb, so there's no problem getting protein from plant foods. And here are some Brazil nuts, which are very high in selenium, which enables the body to make an enzyme that stops free radicals, which are the most toxic chemicals in our body produced by toxic man-made chemicals. Here are macadamia nuts, those wonderful Queensland nuts that are very high in fat. The protein's about 13%, so it is still significant, not as much as almonds, but a very good level of fat. And walnuts. The special thing about walnuts is that of their fat, about 8 to 10% of it is omega-3, the same oil that makes salmon famous. And so they're a very, very good seed, a very, very good nut to eat. And here's cashews. Cashews are to die for to some people. Very, very enjoyable. Now, the interesting thing about nuts, especially these, is that nuts are the most fat-rich food there is. Even almonds are 54%, which is about more than twice as high as in meat. And these other nuts, about 2/3, around about 65% fat, which is actually oil, which is exactly the kind of fat we need. And doctors used to tell people, don't eat nuts because they're high fat content. Then they actually looked at some research that said that for every day people have nuts for protein instead of meat, their heart disease risk reduces by about 8%. So they are spectacularly good foods. Eat a variety of nuts. Don't eat just one kind in a meal. Eat a variety to get a balance of amino acids. And they're pistachios, which is just another kind. The more variety, the better. Coming into the legumes, we have cans of kidney beans, soya beans, chickpeas, and mixed beans, and that one is baked beans. Now, normally we don't recommend foods in a can, but when beans or fish are cooked in a can, the foods are hermetically sealed, and that is the best way to cook. So with a food like this, where you're not concerned with super freshness as you are with a vegetable, cooking in a can is fine. The only question is, what are the additives used? Well, typically these have salt and sugar added, but by puncturing the can, draining off the liquid, as soon as you open it, you drain that away, and what's left is the legume itself, which is extremely good nutrition. This can of mixed beans is a really good idea because, again, it balances the amino acids. So the 4-bean mix is good nutrition. Soya beans are the richest plant food there is. They are almost the equivalent of liver in the animal kingdom. They're the most protein-rich food, about 33% protein. No food, no animal food, no other food has anything like that amount of protein, and they have a high concentration of minerals and vitamins to match it, and fibre as well. They do have phytoestrogens, so it is possible to overeat soya beans. Probably that amount of soya beans in a week would be enough. You wouldn't want to be eating that every couple of days. So keeping soya beans down in quantity is the trick. There are some lentils, they're dried lentils that would be cooked at home. Now, the next one is seeds. We're talking about protein-rich seeds. Sunflower seeds, pepitas, those green Mexican pumpkin seeds, flax seeds, and tahini, which is sesame seeds ground into paste. These are protein-rich seeds, about 18% protein, about 24% protein, the sunflower seeds, as much as young lamb. And the interesting things about these, sunflower seeds contain sunflower oil, which is polyunsaturated, and in the whole seed, as long as it's not rancid, that is excellent nutrition. Pepitas, these absolutely jump out amongst most other foods for their high iron content. Pepitas contain 4 times the iron that's in red meat, 11 milligrams per 100 grams, so just loaded with iron. So if somebody's iron is low, get into the pepitas. Flax seeds contain the second highest level of omega-3, that highly unsaturated oil that's in salmon. Chia seeds are the richest, which which have become well known these days, and these marvellous flax seeds come next, followed by salmon and walnuts. And tahini is a good food, ground sesame seeds, made very easy to digest because the machine has chewed it for you. And quinoa, these quinoa flakes or quinoa seeds, come from South America, where they're known as the gold of the Incas. They are such good nutrition, so they can well and truly be eaten frequently. Now, coming to the animal products, eggs and cheese. In a plant-based diet, adding some animal food is quite a good idea. That from good old Bega down the south coast, Australian, proudly Australian, owned and made. The label says, and that's what they are. That's a block cheese. It's 33% fat, mostly saturated, so it's fairly loaded with fat, so you don't eat a lot of it. In fact, don't eat a lot of any kind of cheese, because when it's overdone, then it can contribute to quite nasty health problems. But a moderate amount makes food very tasty, very enjoyable. We would say in the Natural Health Society, maybe 100 grams a week is an upper limit. If the dairy product's in the form of yoghurt, then a small carton, not this one, but one of those small yoghurt cartons every day instead would perhaps be suitable. Eggs. Eggs are a really good food. Those 2 eggs there, coming to about 200 grams or just under that, would be enough protein in total without any other protein-rich food. And they're from my own free-range chooks, and very good nutrition. We would say eat eggs about once a week, and at the most twice. The yolks are very high in cholesterol. So what? Research has found that when we eat a cholesterol food like that regularly, the liver learns to make less, and after 2 or 3 months, the blood level of cholesterol has gone back to what it was originally. And again, there's a lot of research now talking about cholesterol as not being the initiator of heart disease anyway. Coming into the flesh foods, salmon. There's a couple of varieties of salmon. The fish that are high in omega-3, which is why they're in vogue these days, are salmon, sardines, herrings and mackerel. Now, and they're all good foods. They're in a can, of course, but again, they're hermetically sealed. It's quite a good way to cook them. If salmon is farmed, or for a start, all the fresh salmon in Australia today, 95% of it is farmed off the coast of Tasmania. The only way to get wild salmon is in a can. There's a very strong reason to go for wild salmon. If the salmon in a can is farmed, if that lid is plain, like the bottom of the can, just to make the point, then that'll be farmed. Wild salmon is in a can with Alaska, USA written on the lid. In the case of Paramount, they actually write wild on the label, so that's very, very helpful. Now, coming into the flesh foods, here are a couple of lamb chops, red meat. Now, in Natural Health, we don't recommend red meat, and most world governments these days are putting limits on it. The difference between nuts, just to take almonds for example, this most benign nut that's so high in minerals it's actually alkali forming. It's a freak amongst these protein carbohydrate rich foods because it's alkali forming from its high mineral content. The plant proteins are basically protein rich foods are basically protein, starch, starchy carbohydrate, unsaturated fat, a lot of minerals, vitamins and fibre and a very small amount of water. In contrast, the flesh foods, red and white meats, are basically protein, or these red meats are basically protein, saturated fat, and not many minerals because in the animal the minerals are in the bones and we can't eat bones. Even if we could chew bones, we don't have enough acid in our stomach to digest bones. The acid needs to be 10 times stronger than our stomach acid to digest bones. So the nutrition in plant proteins is far superior to that in flesh proteins, which is why there's a lot of issue today about not overeating red meat. And we don't say that never ever touch animal proteins. Just for people who like their meat, just replacing some meat meals in the week with plant proteins is a big step in the right direction. Nuts, legumes, seeds. And the amount of protein we need in a day is not very much. One of these chops, which I don't want to handle, One of these chops would be enough protein for the day, nothing else would be needed. Just one of those would be plenty. So we do not need a lot of protein, typically 100 to 150 grams of the food as served on the plate, which in the case of that can of beans would be enough for a day. They're cooked, so there's quite a high water content in that can of beans. Now, coming into the starchy carbohydrates.